The Chicago Bears got their first look at this year's class of rookie players at this weekend's rookie minicamp, and we started to get a better sense of what types of roles some of this year's early draft picks are going to play.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook, join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk, and make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Our podcast today starts with the rookie cornerback, Kyler Gordon, getting his first reps in a Bears uniform, not with the full cast, but just with all the other rookies, standing out a little bit in what he did also missed some practice with some cramps and some other things, and we get a more defined sense of what his role is going to look like this season as far as where they're going to start him and then what they could kind of push toward and open up more for in the future. And we'll turn to the third-round pick, wide receiver Velus Jones from Tennessee. We'll hear from offensive coordinator Luke Getsy about the way Velus stands out on the field and the way he stands out off the field and the way he's already impressing this Bears coaching staff right away at rookie minicamp. We wrap up back on the defensive side with safety Jaquan Brisker, and we'll hear about the major consensus the Bears had on him as a draft prospect, what they really like about him, and how he fits into this defense at the safety position. But we start with Kyler Gordon, the cornerback out of Washington, stepping in, presumably going to be the Bears' starting outside cornerback opposite of Jalen Johnson. The Bears coaching staff is not going to hand him that job, as with any of these other rookies in this class, but that's sort of our outside expectation of where he should be able to get to by week one. There are other young cornerbacks on this roster that can compete with him at that spot, most notably probably a Thomas Graham, who we saw last season play at a high level. But when you hear Bears defensive coordinator Alan Williams talk about what they like about Kyler Gordon, and then also his versatility to play outside or play in the slot, and how they're going to sort of work through that one step at a time, you can get a sense of the excitement and the confidence in what he can do even this early as a rookie.
Coach, we've heard a lot about Kyler's versatility to play inside, to play outside. How do you view him, and will you try and get him to be a versatile player for you to be able to do both things, or we kind of focus on one from the onset and just kind of let him get that down, or are you going to try and cross-train him?
You already answered my question. Yeah, we're just gonna let him do what he does and kind of see how he shapes out, and then give him one thing to do, and that right now that's outside, and then we'll see how much he can do, how much we can push him. But as of right now, he'll be an outside corner. I'm not sure if it's left or right. Will yet to be determined, and we'll go from there.
Dan Weeder from Chicago Tribune, good to see you. When you got deeper into Kyler in the pre-draft process, from a coverage standpoint, what were the things that jumped out to you that fit with what Matt wants to do defensively, and yourself, obviously? Yeah,
first of all was just size. I like the size that he has, thickness. He's not a frail guy. He's a thick guy. So those attributes, and then the attributes that Mom and Daddy gave him. He's got speed. He's got the right temperament that we like. He is athletic. He runs. And then we look at the football IQ. He's instinctive. And then we go to the stuff that he did on tape. He's sticky in coverage at the top of the route. He stays connected, and then he finishes plays, which is the most important thing. That at the moment of truth, he makes a play. So there was a lot to like about the guy.
Alan, is there a benefit when, I know you said Kyler, the plan is to start him outside. Is there a benefit in not having to have a rookie corner have to pick up the nickel right away, just given how challenging that position is? And it's not easy, obviously, playing corner in the NFL, but having someone play outside versus all the responsibilities that come with playing the nickel?
Yeah, the nickel is probably the hardest position on the football field. It used to be that the nickel was the 12th guy or the 13th guy that you'd have. Now in today's football game, when you have so much sub or 11 personnel, that guy's a starter, and that guy's a critical piece of the defense, and that guy has to do a lot of things. He's got to fit like a linebacker and a safety. He's got to cover like a corner. He's got to have the mentality of a Mike linebacker. So to have him go outside and inside, it's tough on a rookie. So to be able to stick him in one place and let him go and develop and learn and feel comfortable, right now that's the plan. But it's the plan to be determined. I get to change it when need be, if we need to. So that's the plan now.
So purely an outside cornerback for Kyler Gordon for now, with some of that flexibility possible in the future. And I think that versatility can be helpful in this situation. When you hear Alan Williams talk about the importance of that slot position and the multitude of just like responsibilities that are a little bit more difficult in there, you can see why maybe the team wanted to prioritize a veteran like Tavon Young coming in as a free agent to at least fill that spot at the beginning of the season. And Young has a fairly significant injury history, so you could see that, maybe sometime down the line, if Young gets hurt or whatever, could you move Kyler Gordon into the slot and then, put Thomas Graham on the outside or Duke Shelley or one of these other cornerbacks? Or I guess, do you trust Thomas Graham if you can fully play him in the slot and let him master those same things in the same sense that like Kyler Gordon can fully master the stuff on the outside? I think they like having some different options in their back pocket there, but recognizing that, they would prefer a guy like Tavon Young being the veteran in the slot to start. And then if you have to go to some of the younger guys, at least then they will have had more time to better prepare for those positions and kind of stick them down and master one area that they can be particularly effective. I'm curious how that approach will go on offense with Velus Jones as another one of these players that can do a lot of different things, but like we heard there for defense, being able to sit one guy at one spot and let him master that first can also be a really helpful process. So we'll hear from offensive coordinator Luke Getsy on what they envision for Velus Jones and why they like him so much next on Locked On Bears. Just because we're in the offseason doesn't mean there isn't plenty of sports betting available for you with our friends at betonline.net. They're going to be the number one source for all of your sports betting stats and information needs. This offseason, there are futures bets on this upcoming season. Bears over under 7 wins is the win total right now. Bears odds to make the playoffs is pretty strongly favoring no at this point in the offseason. Plus futures on Coach of the Year, MVP, Most Improved Player, all the different superlatives are available to bet right now. And BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from basketball playoffs, baseball season, hockey playoffs, soccer, tennis, boxing, live betting, esports, even your favorite Vegas casino games online. Head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action you need to know. BetOnline, where the game starts. The excitement for the offense in this draft class starts with Velus Jones out of Tennessee, the wide receiver who can be so much more than a wide receiver. A player we've heard compared to Deebo Samuel, Cordero Patterson. I think Tyreek Hill was a name that Ryan Poles mentioned, not as a comparison of skill sets, but a comparison of perhaps career trajectories, with Velus Jones being a very effective return man in college, in addition to a threat out of the backfield, a player who can play the slot and the outside wide receiver spot. But like we just heard from Alan Williams talking about Kyler Gordon, Gordon has versatility on that end, but they really like the idea of taking Gordon, putting him at one spot, letting him master the outside, and then figure out, push him a little bit to try some additional things. But with Velus Jones, is the value there a little bit more of the the jack of all trades as opposed to the master of none, in that, you're not going to necessarily try and turn Velus Jones into being the master, like outside number one wide receiver, because his value is more so in that ability to do different things. Whereas Kyler Gordon's value is more so in being able to be a really good cornerback wherever you put him. And the best way to maximize that value seems to be to put him to one spot and let him get really good at that. But with Velus Jones, it might be a slightly different approach. Here's what offensive coordinator Luke Getsy said about what they like about Velus Jones and how he's really handling this process early on, coming in super prepared and mature and matching in person a lot of what they saw on tape.
As you started watching film on Velus and started to get to know what he could do, what did you like about how he could fit with your offense?
No, one, physically, he's a physically mature dude. He can handle this league. You can see that already. And then the speed just jumped at you on the tape. When that guy gets the ball in his hand, he looks like 4.3 on the field. Not many guys can do that, and I think that's what stood out about this guy. He has a chance to score every time he touches the ball.
How does it help for you to have somebody like him that he's not just an X receiver? He's somebody that you can move around a lot. What does that versatility do for you?
Well, that's what the whole offense is built around, the versatility of everybody. So we want versatile guys that can do a bunch of different things, give us an opportunity to do a bunch of different things with each guy. So we don't want just one guy that can run down the field. We don't want just one guy that can run a choice route. We want guys that can do a bunch of different things. So, he definitely has that versatility, so it's really cool. That was fun to see this weekend.
What were your impressions of working with him for the first time? Obviously, you've scouted him, you've seen him on tape, I'm sure you even met with him, but being out there on the field and in the meeting room, what was that like with Velus?
Yeah, he's all business, man. He came in a suit. He was ready to go. He takes great notes, bought his own whiteboard, and he came in ready. He was focused, and he's a business approach, so I'm excited. I think he's somebody that's going to be all in, focused in, trying to figure everything out, and it's a lot for all those guys right now. But I love the way he came in, his approach.
He really emphasized there that the offense is sort of built on a lot of that flexibility of being able to have different guys do different things. And of course, really cool to hear about, Velus Jones coming up, like in a suit or whatever with a whiteboard and being super focused and all in, even in a way that's perhaps advanced to some extent for a rookie. That doesn't mean he's guaranteed to be some, super a great draft steal necessarily, but it is, encouraging that especially for a rookie older like Velus Jones is, that he does seem to come in carrying himself more like an older player. And maybe that's all, worthless. The whiteboard or wearing a suit or whatever, but it's still fun and interesting and kind of good to know. But I think the more interesting idea here is how you ask a young player who's still trying to learn the offense and still trying to just adapt to being a pro and like living in Chicago and getting to know his coaches and getting to know his quarterback, to then also try and juggle being a part-time running back and maybe a part-time slot receiver and a part-time outside receiver and running jet sweeps. Is he going to get handoffs? Is he going to run screens? Is he going to then also run, downfield routes? How is he going to fit into progressions? Plus, he's also going to have to use time and energy at practice on kickoff and punt returns. The special teams coordinator has kind of said as much, that if they can return, they're going to be trained to do both, and we're going to use them as much as we can in those areas. And so it can be a lot to throw on Velus Jones's lap. And so I would imagine, in sort of the reverse of what Kyler Gordon is getting, I would bet that Velus Jones is going to get more like specific things at each position. They're not going to put him at running back sometimes and have him learn every run concept in the offense and learn how to outside zone, inside zone, power, counter, misdirection, all the different, draw plays that they could have, that David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert and even Treston Ebner might have to learn as a running back. And I think they also, but they would then have specific plays for him in the backfield. So, what, for you, Velus, right now as a rookie, you're going to learn out of the shotgun in the backfield these 3 runs, or or even from a slot in a jet sweep or reverse type play. Right? I think for him, he'll have a few specific things at each spot, as opposed to having to be a master at everything at any of the individual spots. And so it's not necessarily like specifically a quote unquote Velus Jones package, because I think you can do a little bit more than that. You can have plays where he's not the primary option, right? You don't have to only include him on plays where the ball is going to be in his hands. But I do think the more different types of things you're going to ask him to do, then the less things at each spot you can expect him to be able to consistently do really well. And so how much of a gadget they want to make him will depend on how much they can actually put on his shoulders throughout this process. And that's what's going to be so interesting to see, like how this role develops over the course of his rookie season, right? Does that role change and grow in some specific ways? That was something I remember when the Bears signed Cordarrelle Patterson the first time. I went through and did a deep dive into how the Patriots had used Patterson before the Bears. And one of the things that stood out was like, for the first, I don't remember the exact splits of how many weeks, but it would like change every 3 or 4 weeks. His role would be new. So it would be like the first 4 weeks, he was like purely a running back, and they would hand it off to him on these 3 or 4 types of plays. And then after 4 weeks of doing that or so, then they made him more an outside receiver, and they mostly threw him screens and little end around jet sweep type plays. And they did that for 3 or 4 weeks. And then the next 3 or 4 weeks, they started throwing to him more downfield. And so like it was just enough to where he could master this short amount of this small list of things to do, unveil it for a couple weeks, and then once the defense starts to learn, like, oh, okay, when Patterson's in the game, they're doing this with him. Then Bill Belichick switched it, and then had Patterson learn the new set of things. And then once the defense would have fully adjusted to that, you switch it to the third set of things for Patterson, and they kept it fresh for him and fresh for the defense to have to learn all throughout Patterson's most successful season in New England. And I wonder if we might not see some type of similar approach to Velus Jones. Maybe not quite that rigid and that defined, but that concept of like keep the list of things small and keep the defense guessing and then switch it up as much and as regularly as Velus Jones can handle it. I think that's how you can maximize a lot of that versatility without overdoing it on him or making it too complicated, but simple enough for the offense, still difficult for the defense. So I'm really excited to see kind of what he can handle and how they choose to kind of go through it with him on the offensive side of the ball. And the parallels, or I guess the contrast to Kyler Gordon will be fun to watch. Because I think we'll see a similar type of thing with Jaquan Brisker as with Kyler Gordon on this Bears defense. We know what he's going to be, but I don't think we fully realized the type of conviction this Bears organization had over him as that safety to really be that pair with Eddie Jackson. We'll learn a little bit more about what he brings and how much the coaching staff and the scouting staff were all in, and maybe that's why they didn't end up drafting a receiver with that second round pick. That's next on Locked On Bears. Locked On Bears podcast is powered by Built Bars, the world's best tasting protein bars. It's the protein I take before I do this podcast, because Built Bars are like protein bars, but they actually taste really, really good, and more importantly, they're good for you. Every Built Bar is soft and easy to chew and covered in 100% real chocolate. None of that artificial crap. It's real chocolate. It really does taste like a candy bar. But every Built Bar is low sugar, low calories, high fiber, and high protein. It is an elite combination of a protein-packed protein bar and tasting delicious and being really good for you. You can't find anything else like it anywhere else on the protein bar market. You got to try it for yourself. Head on over to Built.com, enter in our promo code LOCKED15. You're going to get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. The Chicago Bears doubling down on the secondary with those 2 second-round picks might have surprised us a little bit at the time, but as we start to learn a little bit more about how the team went through this process and what they really sort of felt about these players, you can really get a sense of why they felt like the opportunity to get Kyler Gordon followed by Jaquan Brisker was too good to pass up. And I think they started to see the very early stages of the fruits of that. So, maybe just the stem or the leaf poking through the ground as the seeds start to grow in that analogy. And once you sort of get a sense of how they went about it, you can understand a little bit more why they really felt like, they couldn't go for the wide receivers that we had kind of talked about as potentially being in that range that did end up going a handful of draft picks later, or a couple offensive linemen in that area, or any of the other ways the Bears could have gone. Because as we heard from defensive coordinator Alan Williams, like everybody in their, not everybody, like the majority of their scouting staff, their coaching staff, everybody seemed to be all in on Brisker as a prospect that they just had really across the board some real conviction on.
You watched Jaquan on tape. You saw what he did at Penn State. But when he came here and you got to know him a little bit, what about his makeup told you that he'd be a good fit for what you guys are trying to do here?
Yeah, can I throw an acronym out there, Coach? He would say M&M. He would say motor and mean. So he would say that he was motor and mean. And then he would say, hey, he has quickness, he has instincts, he has strike. So those are things that we saw on tape. And we, through the process, and the process is you look at tape, you read the write-ups, the combine, and then you have the guys in, and you see what other people say about them, our scouts, and then you get all that information. And the great thing about Ryan Poles is everyone gets to give their take on a player, and the neat thing is you don't have to agree. And so but when you do agree, and everyone goes, yes, I like, yes, 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 and and that's rare when you get all those yeses. And when you get those yeses, you go, yeah, you go yes. And so that's about him. That's what we came up with a group. So some of the same things about our corner. Those same things. We like the body type. We like the FBI. We like the things that he did on tape. So it was a huge yes from everyone.
When you hear the coaches, talk about how much they like a player and how much they liked about that player, you can really you can get caught up a little bit and think like, wow, like he sounds great, like really good player. And then you're like, well, if he's so good, then like how did he fall to 48 where the Bears took him? Because you can really just hear all the effusive praise, and you start to maybe, I don't know, do you question a little bit that they're just sort of gushing about a guy because they got him? But like, you can also sort of see where like, the ways they talk about him with quickness and motor and being mean and being able to hit and strike and stuff, right? We're not talking about the same type of like, rangy ball skills type free safety that would get sort of the big bucks in terms of like positional value, the Eddie Jackson type of safety. We're talking about more of a box safety, which is still very valuable and very good, but maybe the difference between Brisker being a first-round pick and being a second-round pick is some of the idea of positional value there. And when the Bears have someone like Eddie Jackson, then they have more room to be able to pair him with a player like Brisker. And a lot of the ways that we heard Alan Williams earlier on describe the responsibilities of the slot position, so often that safety position will end up playing a slot position and will have to fill like a linebacker and cover like a cornerback in a lot of those ways. And it is going to be a tough ask for a guy like Jaquan Brisker to step in and play that at a high level as a rookie. But there's a lot to like, as we sort of heard him say. Like that's why they see the faith and the confidence in him filling that spot. And that's why I think you can sort of get this combination of like, yes, it is really good value for the Bears at 48 and can be a very good player in this defense and can fill a need for them and also be a guy that they had like uniform conviction on when they yes, 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 yes. That's a really good sign that, for organizational direction there, that it's not just groupthink, that Ryan Poles really gave them all a chance to give their opinions and that just happened to align. You can see where that's a smart way to go through the process for them. But then also that, no, he's probably not going to be the 6 or 8 interception type, deep ball rangy safety that, like the Eddie Jackson mold is in this defense. And that limits some of the potential there, potentially. But that's a very, very high limit, that if he could even get to the limit of what he's capable of doing, he can be a Pro Bowl player and do all these great things and be a great player for this Bears defense. So I think there's a lot to like about Brisker. And I think there's a lot of value to having Brisker and Gordon kind of going through this together at the same time, being connected and intertwined as rookies, learning the defense at the same time. They can sort of, they came from different backgrounds, but they can kind of compare notes a little bit and help each other learn the new things. Yes, they're at different spots, but they're running the same plays. They have to make the same type of coverage calls. And certainly if Gordon's going to play the slot at some points or move into the slot, if they're going to, maybe have Jalen Johnson follow around number 1 wide receivers and then maybe move Gordon as a result of that, or, have Thomas Graham come in on the outside and move Gordon in the slot. They have some different options there, right? If they want to get creative down the line, then they're both going to be covering the slot at times and have literally the same exact responsibilities in those roles. And I think it's kind of cool and effective to have them really learning and growing through that process at the same time. You also have the 7th round pick, Elijah Hicks from Cal, learning the safety at the same time, although he's dealing with an injury and was not a participant, it seemed like, in the mini camps. And I should say Kyler Gordon had cramps as well and missed some reps in practice, just needing to be hydrated and all that stuff. It's all pretty commonplace in rookie mini camps and nothing to be concerned about. Just wanted to cover our bases and make sure that we're all over everything coming out of Hallis Hall all offseason long. That's what you can expect right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. We're keeping up with any and all things that are coming out of Hallis Hall before we dive in a little bit here into getting to know these prospects a little bit better. So I don't know if it'll be tomorrow's podcast or depending on what happens news-wise, but I've already got the interview recorded with Drake Toll from Locked On Baylor to dive in a little more deep on Treston Ebner, the 6th-round running back, because he's a prospect I don't think we've talked a ton about, and I think there's a lot to like there, a lot of potential, and I think he can be a player that Bears fans will enjoy seeing when the ball is in his hand. So one of the days this week, we will for sure have Drake Toll, because I literally did already record the interview talking about the Baylor offense and where Ebner fit in that, his strengths and weaknesses, and what we can expect for him in the NFL. Looking to do the same with our friends from Locked On Volunteers, talking about Velus Jones, and we'll get some other draft analysts on to talk about this Bears draft class in the coming days and weeks as well. So I hope you'll keep tuning in, keep making Locked On Bears your first listen each and every day, wherever you listen to the podcast, or if you follow along on the YouTube videos as well. Appreciate all the likes and the comments that we get on the channel. It's been fun to see that grow, and I appreciate everyone who's been around for the ride. We're going to be here for you all off season long. When there's no Bears football going on, we will still be here for you. So I hope as a result, the Locked On Bears podcast makes it a little bit easier for you to bear down.